So when it comes to cosmology, there's basically two schools of thought. You got geocentrism, which has actually been the main school of thought since the beginning of time. Every civilization basically believed this, that we lived on a flat, stationary, enclosed plane where the sun, moon, and stars are the ones revolving around us.
As a woman, I seen and I discovered myself that the world is definitely flat.
Do the right research and you use your own eyes and your own mind, you just might be surprised at what you will find.
Basically, I started off just like anyone else, growing up in the school system. 5 years old, getting told things that I couldn't even really figure out for myself. I couldn't even ask questions, and I think that's the way everybody kind of started off, growing up in the school system.
I'm from Ohio, and I've been a pool player my whole life, an artist as well, and I've been playing professionally for couple decades now and teaching pool all around the world. I've done a couple of DoD shows for the military bases in Europe, like entertaining the troops on the Navy and Air Force bases, and played in pro tournaments all over in Asia and Europe and all over the US. And I love teaching pool. But I also love art. So I've been an artist since I was 3 years old and started painting in 2000, some big paintings, portraits, pointillism, blacklight, stuff that means a lot to me, and like iconic figures. I love nature. I believe in God. I don't really have a particular religion per se, but I've always believed in God. But I moved to Florida, so I remember eating oranges, climbing the orange trees down in Florida at my grandpa's place. That was awesome. And then going fishing with my dad, like in Idaho. I used to go visit him in northern Idaho and go fishing for trout and bass, camping, and doing all the sports, football, baseball. I wanted to be in the NFL, and well, really, it was 3 years ago, almost exactly 3 years ago on YouTube. It was when there was only like maybe 5 flat Earth videos. Now there's millions of them. It's the most widely searched term on YouTube and on Google, I believe, flat Earth. But this was back when there were only 5 videos, and it just kind of showed up on my screen. It's like, wait a minute, what's this? Because I actually have a degree in science. I have a degree in geography, and I was always the best Earth space science student in my school. So I know about the whole heliocentric model, so obviously I was like, wait a minute, flat Earth, so I have to check it out. And what grabbed my attention was this guy, the Morgile. He was talking about the horizon being flat and eye level. And I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. So I'm thinking, I've been flying my whole life, right? And that intrigued me the most. And you know what? I've been visualizing the curve of the Earth my whole life. I'd always imagined the Earth to gradually go off and curve, right? And I just try to visualize this, right? So now I'm like, whoa, okay, it's flat, and the horizon is eye level and flat no matter how high you go, because that wouldn't make sense if we lived on a curved surface, right? So that grabbed my attention, and then bam, I was hooked on studying this and watching all the videos and looking back into all my science knowledge. And it was like, from then on, it was 3 hours a day or more of studying this, more like 6 or 9 hours. The first couple weeks, it was like nonstop. I couldn't sleep. So that's how I started looking into it.
Well, when I'm driving, the experiment can be, obviously we're all driving straight. The ground is flat. It's not like we're falling down to a deep hole of the black hole, a never-ending hole. It's straight on. Like, come on, you think about it and you see that the Earth is straight on flat. We're driving all the way to our destination, and it's a straight on ground flat world that we live in. And you kind of have to see it, and you have to feel that, hey, when I'm driving, I'm going straight. I'm not going nowhere else. I'm not going around or whatnot. Obviously, our human beings, we do have that kind of low because we got to create the whole concrete, but the Earth is definitely flat. Take a step back and look at around the whole world. Like, just step back. Actually, just go ahead and get on a plane and just fly out and look and see. and have that quiet mindset. Stop all the music, stop all the rambling around you, and see what I'm talking about, because the earth is definitely flat. It's so exciting when people bring me the topic of the earth is flat or a circle or whatever they want to say it. It's very exciting because it gets you thinking. It gets you into that deep thought like, wow, that's a very good question. And because as a young little girl, me traveling till now, who I am right now, and as a woman, I've seen and I discovered myself that the world is definitely flat. You know, it's a very good topic, and I believe that everybody should just get into it and see and stop going around it that the earth is flat. Like, you can have your own opinion, but see it and know it and experience it as long as we're here into this earth to see that the world is actually flat. Period.
And you've also got heliocentrism, which tells us that we are spinning at over 1,000 miles per hour, circling the sun at 67,000 miles per hour, while the whole galaxy is traveling through infinite space at crazy speeds. And that was introduced from Copernicus in the mid-16th century. Actually, Pythagoras came up with the idea before that, but Copernicus had already been working on a body of work that he was going to publish after he died. But the Vatican and the Jesuits basically persuaded him and pushed him to release it. And not only that, but come up with these other theories that would take people's minds away from the Creator, the God in Scriptures. So that's kind of how we got these two schools of thought here.
The flat earth idea began at the beginning of history. According to all the ancient societies and civilizations, most of them thought that the earth was flat. It's the globe earth idea that's only been around for definitely 500 years, but it goes back to the 5th century BC, back to Pythagoras and the early Greek philosophers. But it wasn't until Copernicus, he actually was the first mainstream guy to promote the globe earth idea. And so it's been around for at least 500 years. And it was Eratosthenes, the Greek basically philosopher, who supposedly proved that the earth is a ball first by measuring shadows at a certain time of day. But what people don't realize is when they show you this idea is that actually you get the same phenomenon with a sun that is close and small, right? Obviously, so if you hold a light up above, the floor, it's not going to cast a shadow if there's a pencil directly underneath it. But if you put a pencil like 20 feet away, that pencil is going to cast a shadow, right? So that's the idea with the flat earth. So it doesn't mean that we live on a ball when you have, different length shadows. That would only come from the assumed sun being, millions of miles away, right? But the flat earth idea has been around for a long, long time.
So globe heads think the earth is round, but I don't think that the earth is round. Period. Come on. It's definitely flat. It's definitely flat. They think it's always round. I'm like, come on. Think about it. Use your eyes. It's flat. Period. How would you think that the world is globe? Like, come on. It's flat. It's flat. You have to just see it. Like, that you keep going around it, that it's circle. Come on. I'm not trying to go around it, but come on. It's definitely flat. It's definitely flat. Come on, guys. I've been through all the countries that you can ever dream of or think of. Somalia, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Dubai, France, obviously, Germany and Australia. Those are one of the most beautiful areas that you can actually think and look at and seeing that the earth is flat. When you travel so much, you experience so much, and you get that energy and you see what's really in front of you, which is I'm very close to nature and the world, you'll see that the earth is definitely flat. Period.
We'll start with some basic questions. The sky is
in a world where it feels like nothing is as it seems.
blue.
It's blue, of course. Oh, the sky's blue.
The sky's blue.
1 + 1 is
2.
2. 2.
2.
There's at least one truth we thought was indisputable.
And the earth is
Flat.
Flat.
the earth is flat.
My reality, my senses tell me that the earth is flat and stationary.
Or So I thought. But for the people attending the first Flat Earth International Conference here in Cary, North Carolina, their Earth is indisputably not round.
Yeah, everybody here can agree on absolutely one thing, which is it is not a globe.
For centuries, a flat Earth was accepted as certainty until science and sailboats said otherwise.
One of the rules of power is you never admit that there's someone bigger than yourself.
But in 2015, this guy, Mark Sargent, posted his flat Earth clues.
Part of a series of clues that can help you get your head around both the design of the flat Earth system we live in.
You're kind of the father of this movement. How would you?
Don't do
You're
that.
the one who sort of started it all.
I did not invent flat Earth. All I did was walk up to a door, point at it, say, you know what? I think there's some really interesting things on the other side of this, and check it out for yourself. If Flat Earth is a university, FEA, then I would be the freshman recruiter.
People have traveled from around, actually, Mark would say, across the flat world to attend.
The first rule of Flat Club is you don't talk about Flat Club.
Until now.
I have a poem about that. It's right here.
Amy Nicholson wrote a book of poetry about her flat Earth journey.
A few months flat and 7 months to rally.
Kim Gurley came to the conference from Houston.
I haven't really come out all the way yet. I'm still a little in the closet.
The North Pole's in the middle.
Lainey Inavali came from even farther.
I mixed with quite a lot of flat earthers in New Zealand.
You know flat earthers, I guarantee it, but you don't know who they are because they're afraid of talking about it.
1, 2, 3.
Like many modern movements, this one has grown in large part out of the internet, with rappers like Odd TV evangelizing to hundreds of thousands of subscribers.
No more living on a cartoon ball.
And YouTube channels like
Globebusters,
encouraging skepticism about what you've been taught. For the serious students here at the conference,
This has got to a point now where it's becoming real.
it all comes down to proof.
When it comes to science, there's things you can test right now, right? Fire burns, water's wet, drop something, falls to the ground, that appears to be gravity. Those are things you can test, right?
But the curving horizon, the sloping sea level, the spin of the Earth, unless you can see these phenomena with your own eyes, they may not be true.
A lot of people are going, this is
crazy, right? But think about this. For the last 20, 25 generations, this is what we've told people.
Unlike what we've been told in school, some flat earthers imagine the Earth looks like a snow globe, round but not sphere. The North Pole is at the center of most flat Earth maps, with the ice of Antarctica holding everything in.
So are you certain this is what the Earth looks like?
Pretty sure. Almost.
Being taught, evolution, the Big Bang, heliocentrism, gravity, just globes in your face, since day one. But as I got older, I started to question things myself and look at it, from my own perspective. And what I've kind of come to figure out is that I believe that this whole thing is to just take us away from the Creator, get us away from God, let everyone think that you come from monkeys, live on a spinning ball, at 1,000 miles per hour, circling the sun at 67,000 miles per hour, all the while shooting through infinite space at unimaginable speeds, and ever-expanding galaxy, universe, whatever you want to call it. But, like I say, when I go back and I look at it today, it just doesn't make any sense. I'm going to tell you basically how it got started was with Pythagoras, who was known as the first Freemason. Then it went into Copernicus in the mid 16th century. And he actually was working on a body of work with his heliocentric model. And he didn't want to publish it until after he died. But it was the Vatican and it was the Jesuits who they really persuaded him and pushed him to put this body of work out as soon as he could. But he didn't want to do it, but eventually they got to him and he did. And that's kind of where it all started. Because at the beginning of time, every civilization knew that we lived on a flat, stationary, geocentric, enclosed Earth where the sun, moon, and stars are the ones revolving around us. not that we're spinning. I mean, you can look in the Bible, you can go to the Quran. It doesn't matter if you're Christian or not, even the pagans, like they all had the same cosmological view. But it wasn't again until Copernicus came and started pushing his theories with the help of the Vatican. And that kind of crept into our school systems. And now, you know, that's the majority of what people think. But, you know, today a lot more people are questioning what we've been told. And you can simply do some experiments, look at science for yourself. The biggest thing that kind of got me thinking that the earth is flat, aside from the Bible and what it teaches, is water and the curve of the earth. If you look at the curve math, according to spherical trigonometry, it's 8 inches per mile squared. So I shouldn't be able to see the Chicago skyline from the Indiana Dunes National Lake Shore from 50 plus miles away. If you take that math, 50 miles squared, you know, 50 times 50, that's 2,500, times 8 is 20,000. Divide that by 12, you've got about 1,667 feet of missing curvature. But if you take a zoom lens and you zoom into it, you can see the whole bottom of the skyline, which according to spherical trigonometry, you shouldn't be able to see that. So we've got a problem there. And water, it's water's natural level. It's water's natural state to remain flat and level. Water cannot curve, but they'll tell you that if you live on a spinning ball, that it does stick to it because of this imaginary force we got called gravity. But gravity's never been proven. Gravity is just a theory. A lot of people will say, well, you know, if the earth is flat, won't you fall off the edge? But tell me what makes more sense. Standing at a 90-degree angle on a flat surface versus standing upside down on a spinning ball. You can't fall off of that. Then that's when the gravity comes into play. But gravity can be easily explained with density and buoyancy. It's as simple as that. If something is more dense than the air, it falls. If it's less dense, like smoke or helium, then it rises.
It's a huge deal because everybody wants to know, like, how was the world made? And I feel like since it kind of looks like a circle in our eyes, I feel like we should find out if it's really flat or round. And obviously when you fly in, it feels like you're just kind of, I look down, I literally see that it's flat. I see it, it's flat. It's a very good topic, I think, because we should, as humans, we should kind of find out how the earth was built and how it was made, you know? We're curious creatures, you know, so that's what I think. So I think it's a very good topic, how we just kind of have to talk about it. And I realized that when my, you know, little young best friends or my family members started just talking about it, and I got into it and I started doing my research. And I started seeing that the earth is definitely flat.
Well, Christopher Columbus supposedly discovered that the earth is a ball, and he brought that into the mainstream. So what people don't realize is that he didn't really prove anything by his voyage, right? So Magellan, by going all the way around the earth, really brought into mainstream that we live on a ball because he circumnavigated the globe, right? But that could easily be done on a flat, round disk, not floating in space, because the flat earth does not assume that the earth is floating in space or that space exists. So Magellan, him circumnavigating the continents, basically you can easily do that on a flat surface, right? So imagine a pizza, right? There's a big flat round circle, and you could just, all you have to do is go around, right? So it doesn't prove that we live on a ball by any means. What I want to talk about with the past is one of the main proofs that a globe earther will bring up is that when you look out over the horizon at a ship sailing away, is that it's going to disappear from the bottom first, and then the mast will appear to go down, and then the boat disappears. So they think that the ship is disappearing over a curved horizon, right, over a curved ball. And this is really before high-powered telescopes. But today we know that the ship is not disappearing over the curve because you can easily see that ship come back into view when you zoom in on it. You can get I think it's like a P900 or something, one of the newest cameras, right? So you'll see that ship disappear, but then you get a camera or a telescope, and sure enough, that the ship will come back into view. And eventually it will disappear from the bottom first. The bottom will disappear. And that has to do with optics and angular resolution. And it's like a whole science on why things disappear from the bottom first. But you don't even need that long of a distance for something to disappear. You could have someone walk away on a hot day on a football field, right? And they're going to disappear, their feet are going to disappear first, right? So that has to do with angular resolution, perspective, and all those things, right? So now we know that ships and objects do not disappear over a curve because of that, right? And the fact that we can see islands over 100 miles away and lighthouses, this proves that we do not live on a flat plane, or that things do not disappear over a curve based on the math of Pythagoras.
From ancient science.
Yeah, well, Pythagoras was talking about basically that we live on a ball of a certain size. Anyway, he had his, all his geometry, right? But the math that they give us today would show that there's a curve of 8 inches per mile, right? But it's not a slope, 8, 8, 8. You actually have to square the mileage, right? So an island 100 miles away, you have to multiply 100 times 8, and then divide by 12 to get the number of feet of supposed drop-off, if you believe in the ball earth theory of the Earth being 25,000 miles in circumference, right? But the fact that we can see islands 100 miles away above the horizon, that proves that the Earth does not have the curvature. Right?
Never disappeared in the first place.
Yeah, it should be 6,666 feet below your line of sight. Yeah, you'll actually see an island with the naked eye. Like from Maui, Maui from Kauai, you can see Maui from Kauai 100 miles away. You can see other islands over 100 miles away when the weather conditions are right. So all this proves that the Earth is actually flat, that water is flat, right? That's once you know that water is flat, then you know that the Earth is flat.
I have to tell you this story. It was in Damascus, Syria, because I was a little girl in Syria in the Middle East. So it was one night I always played soccer, and I always played with the boys because I was like more connected. I was like a kind of tomboyish. So it was that time when I was just running in the nighttime, and my mom and dad kept saying, stay away from those boys and stop playing soccer. And I was like, hey, I didn't take no as an answer. So that's when I started playing with the boys, and we started racing, and he scared me to the point that I ran into the wall, busted my head, and it just started gushing like blood. And I thought to myself, I'm gonna die. But I didn't. And I realized when I was kicking the ball, I feel like the ball was definitely just going straight, and I could have avoided it, but the wall was right there because I was just running speed so fast, and all the guys are laughing at me, but at the same time, I stood there with a patch in my head and saying like, hey, at least I still beat all of y'all, because I made a goal. We were running, because in Syria, it's like a huge mansion. It's like, imagine 2 houses in America, and it's like 3 houses together. It's like a huge mansion. It's all hard rock. Like the ground is all made of rock, and I smashed into that as a little girl. But that didn't stop me, but that's when I realized that the Earth is definitely flat. The way I was running and I could have avoided it, that's just how it ended. And I thought to myself, wow, as a little girl thinking like that, that's quite brilliant.
Now we have to look at NASA. NASA was the biggest hurdle for me to get over when I started researching this. But let me tell you a little bit about NASA. A lot of people will show you the pictures of Earth and tell you that it's real, but in reality, NASA even admits that their pictures are fake and they're all CGI. They're all composites. There's a lot of holes in what we accept as truth versus what NASA tells us. You can look at the moon mission. My question is, how could we have went to the moon if we can't leave low Earth orbit? And they admit that. They say the moon is like 238,000 miles away from Earth, but low Earth orbit is between that. So we've got a problem there. We've got fake CGI pictures. Everything that you look at are all cartoons. You cannot show me a real picture. They even admit that they have to be faked. Also, Operation Paperclip. This was after World War II when the United States brought in over 300 Nazi occult scientists. And that's really how NASA was basically formed. And under the leadership of Wernher von Braun, we kind of come up with modern day science of rocketry and things of that nature. But everything that they give us is a fraud. It's a fake. If you look at his tombstone, he left a Bible verse on it that tells you, I believe it goes, "And the firmament showeth God's handiwork." The firmament in Hebrew means rakia. It means a tangible thing to be beaten out as molten glass, basically a dome. And that was part of what all the early ancient civilizations believed that we had.
During the nighttime, I see the airplanes because I like to look at the stars and just, think about my future and my life. But I look at that plane. It makes sense that Earth is flat because the plane is going straight. Imagine if it wasn't flat. It's kind of common sense. I'm not trying to come after all those opinionated people in this world, but come on. Look in the sky and you see the airplane is going straightwards. It's not going down. It's not coming for us. It's coming straight on.
So there's a term in logic called mutual exclusivity. In this case, it will be called paired mutual exclusivity. This is how we can prove flat Earth today, right? So what that means is that two phenomena cannot be true at the same time, right? If one of them is true, the other one has to be false, right? So you must bring this logic into your sphere, okay? No pun intended. To give you an example, if we live on a ball 25,000 miles in circumference, then we cannot see Chicago from across Lake Michigan, right? Based on the math of a globe, right? So the fact that we can see Chicago from across Lake Michigan, that's true. Therefore, the Earth cannot be a ball because of mutual exclusivity. Those two phenomena are disjoint. So if one of them is true, the other has to be false.
Let's talk about the curve for a minute. The only time you've ever seen a curve is through NASA pictures. There's never been a scientific experiment that has shown the curve or any motion of the Earth at that. In the 1800s, the Michelson-Morley experiment, which we've never been taught about in school, was trying to detect the Earth's motion around the sun, and it failed. And right after that is when Albert Einstein came out with his theory of relativity to basically kind of cover that up. So there's a lot of experiments that we have not been taught or told about. Let's talk about the horizon. When you go to the ocean, people will say that, well, you see that ship over there? You see it disappear out of your eyesight and go over the curve of the Earth? Well, according to spherical trigonometry, 8 inches per mile squared. That's the formula that they give us. So if you take a zoom lens and you zoom in on that ship, the whole thing comes back into view from the bottom to the top, everything. And according to that formula, you shouldn't be able to see that. I'll give you another example. From the Indiana Dunes National Lakeshore, you can see the Chicago skyline from over 50 miles away. So that would be, 50 times 50, 2,500 times 8, 20,000 divided by 12 is roughly 1,667 feet of missing curvature. So we've got another problem there. And water is water's natural. Water naturally seeks and finds its own level. I don't know how you can have water sticking to a ball. You cannot show me an experiment that does that. But if you ask anyone else, who believes in heliocentrism, they'll tell you that it's because of gravity. But gravity is just a theory. Gravity can be explained from density and buoyancy. If something is more dense than the air, it falls. If it's lighter, like smoke or helium, it's going to rise. So no gravity needed. But like I said, there's no experiment that's ever been able to detect motion of the Earth. You cannot measure a curve. People will say, well, we're just so small. If you go up into an airplane, they say you can't see the curve because you're too small, and the Earth is so big. But at the same time, they'll tell you that you can see a ship disappear over the curve of the Earth, which to me just sounds crazy. That doesn't make any sense at all. If you take into effect surveying, if you look at canals, bridges, tunnels, and railroads, none of these people factor in the curve of the Earth when they're building these things. So that's another big point for me as well. A lot of people want to bring up the Coriolis effect. So let's say a bullet is traveling 1,700 miles per hour, and the sniper has to take into effect the spin of the Earth. Why would that be if Tiger Woods doesn't have to do it on a par 3? If you read that, there was actually an experiment that they did years ago where they were trying to see if there was any spin of the Earth. So what they did was they took a hot air balloon and they raised it up, pretty high, and left it there for some hours, and then they dropped it back down to see would they land in another place, and they didn't. They landed exactly where they started. So that to me doesn't make sense either. I think what this whole thing does with heliocentrism is it steals your common sense. It tells you that your senses are wrong. When you walk outside, you don't feel any spin, but they tell you it's an illusion. You see the sun and moon fairly close to you and looking about the same size. They say that's an illusion too. Common sense is just not applied when you look at what we call science today. Honestly, in my opinion, it's more of a religion. It's more of scientism instead of actual science.
Okay, so another example of mutual exclusivity would be a gyroscope. To take a gyroscope on an airplane, right? You set the gyroscope in motion at the beginning of the flight. Now you fly so many miles. If the Earth is curved, after so many miles of flight, the gyroscope will have to be changing its position in space. So it will no longer be level with the airplane, right? So that would have to be true. The gyroscope would have to be moving while you're in the flight. But because when we take flight and a gyroscope does not move during that flight, it doesn't change position in space, that means that the Earth is not a ball.
This camera, part of a flying laboratory, is recovered by Clyde Holliday of Johns Hopkins, who prepared it for its trip to the upper stratosphere. Rivaling the fantastic imagination of Jules Verne, the camera brought back a record of a flight into the heavens of a captured German V-2 rocket. At White Sands, New Mexico, the huge missile takes off. Air Force pictures show the rocket in flight, and the flying camera automatically takes over. The huge projectile drops the Earth behind at the tremendous speed of 4,000 feet per second. The rotation of the rocket causes the planet to spin before the lens, and the camera photographs the Earth 65 miles straight down. The horizon.
There is no curvature to the Earth because the gyroscope actually maintains its position in space, right? So through the logic of mutual exclusivity, we know that the Earth is flat based on gyroscopes, right? So it's logic. You must use this is an actual term in logic. So you have to turn on your logical mind. You can't listen to YouTube videos with somebody, giving like 5 or 10 reasons why the Earth is a globe. You can't just take that as fact. You have to actually use your logic, right? So another thing would be airplanes. So if the Earth was actually moving and spinning at 1,000 miles an hour, it's almost 11,000 miles an hour at the equator. And the sun rises in the east. Okay, so if you fly west or east, you should okay, so just got to cut for a second. Okay, so the Earth is spinning to the east, right? That's why the sun rises in the east.
Yeah.
Right.
Rises in the east and sets in the west.
Yeah.
So the Earth is spinning away from us.
Okay. No, spinning towards the sun in the east, 1,000 miles an hour. That's why it rises in the east if it was spinning, because we're spinning towards the east.
Oh, we're
so
going.
The sun, yeah. Okay, so let me start over on that. Okay. Okay, so with airplanes, according to the globe model, the Earth is spinning towards the east at almost 1,100 miles per hour at the equator. So in North America, we're going around 600 miles an hour, right? So this is faster than the modern day airplane, commercial jetliner, which only goes about 500 miles an hour, right? Or at the equator, say you're flying at the equator. If you're flying at the equator at 500 miles an hour, but the Earth is moving at 1,000 miles an hour, that means that the Earth is actually going to be moving faster than the airplane. So you could not actually fly as fast as the Earth, right? So you could not fly to the east if the Earth was actually moving. You would actually be going backwards in the air. So the only way to fly east would be to go backwards around the world. All you have to do is go up, hover in the air if you're in a helicopter, hover, and then wait for the Earth to come underneath you.
Everybody knows the story of Noah and the Great Flood. How does that story even exist if the Earth wasn't flat? There would be no flood on a globe Earth.
There's some other things pertaining to the globe Earth that don't make sense to me. For instance, if you're flying around a globe, and let's say you're in North America and you're going to go to Australia, so at what point does the plane make a maneuver to turn upright? Because if it just keeps going on as it would be upside down. And also thinking about that, if the Earth is a ball, wouldn't we be seeing rain come up from the horizon? So you mean to tell me that people are upside down right now in Australia and it's raining upwards, raining down on us? So it would be coming from all types of different angles. You would see shooting stars coming up from the horizon as well, but we don't. If you look at a gyroscope on an airplane, there's definitely pilots that will tell you that they're flying over a flat plane, but the plane would have to dip its nose every so often before it would leave and go into outer space, but it doesn't. So but it never changes. But they would have to. So if they dip the nose down, whenever they do, the gyroscope, the artificial horizon, would have to roll back, but it doesn't. It stays flat, and it never changes. And that right there is another proof that we're flying over a flat plane instead of a round Earth.
It takes the same amount of time basically to fly from New York to LA as it does from LA to New York, barring the winds, the jet stream and stuff. Because it basically takes the same amount of time to fly east to west, that proves that the Earth is not moving, because that's impossible, right? If the Earth is moving, right? So this also proves, according to believers in the Coriolis effect of a long-range rifle, of you having to adjust for the spinning of the Earth, basically, if you're going to shoot like 1,000 yards or 1,500 yards. Some people claim that you have to adjust for the spinning of the Earth, right? But we know that's not true, because if you go in a hot air balloon, the balloon is just going to go up. The Earth is not going to spin under that balloon. So that proves that the Coriolis effect for long-range rifles is not true, right? Because if it was, you would also have to account for that if you're flying in a plane, going up in a hot air balloon or a helicopter. But the fact is, as soon as you go up in the air, nothing happens as far as the Earth spinning underneath you now, right? So the same has to be true for a rifle. So the only thing you're going to have to adjust for are winds and all those factors. And this is what I hear from all the top basic snipers, Marine snipers. They actually agree there is no Coriolis effect you have to allow for. If you are allowing for that, then you're probably not a really good sniper. Sorry, but what I think is that we live in a electromagnetic universe, not a gravity universe, right? So we have a lot of factors that we're not aware of because they're being either kept from the public knowledge, if this is knowledge, right? And Tesla, just all the stuff that he gave the world and that he believes in is that we live in an electromagnetic universe and that gravity actually does not exist. And the reason that a hot air balloon goes up in the air is because of the density of the hot air is less dense than the air around it. That's why it goes up. And that's why if you drop an anvil from the roof, it's going to fall to the ground. But if you suspend an anvil in mercury, it's going to float. An iron anvil will float in mercury because the mercury is more dense than the iron anvil, right? So we have an alignment on this flat Earth that's based on electromagnetism, and of course we don't understand it fully because that's not what we're taught in school.
Oh, I have to tell y'all this story. It was in Damascus, Syria, because I was a little girl in Syria in the Middle East. So it was one night I always played soccer, and I always played with the boys because I was like more connected. I was like a kind of tomboyish. So it was that time when I was just running in the nighttime, and my mom and dad kept saying, stay away from those boys and stop playing soccer. And I was like, hey, I didn't take no as an answer. So that's when I started playing with the boys, and we started racing, and he scared me to the point that I ran into the wall, busted my head, and it just started gushing like blood. And I thought to myself, I'm gonna die. But I didn't. And I realized when I was kicking the ball, I feel like the ball was definitely just going straight, and I could have avoided it, but the wall was right there because I was just running speed so fast, and all the guys were laughing at me. But at the same time, I stood there with a patch on my head and saying like, hey, at least I still beat all of y'all, because I made a goal. We were running because in Syria is like a huge mansion. It's like, imagine 2 houses in America, and it's like 3 houses together. It's like a huge mansion. It's all hard rock. Like the ground is all made of rock, and I smashed into that as a little girl. But that didn't stop me. But that's when I realized that the earth is definitely flat. The way I was running and I could have avoided it, that's just how it ended. And I thought to myself, wow, as a little girl thinking like that, that's quite brilliant, you think.
Another reason that I don't believe that we live on a spinning ball is if you look at the Bible. The Bible is pretty clear on cosmology and the creation account. If you actually start in Genesis, the Creator God, He made everything through a series of days. But if you made the sun on the 4th day, then what was the earth orbiting around for 3 days before that? So we've got a problem there as well. If you go to Job, it even talks about how he made it as clay to the signet ring. So what that means is, back when kings would write letters and have the hot clay and they put it on the letter they're going to send out, they would stamp it with their ring, and it gives an upturned edge, which is kind of similar to the model of what we believe the flat earth looks like, with Antarctica actually being the South Pole, which holds the waters in, with the magnetic north of the North Pole being at the center of it, which, by the way, a compass can only work on a flat earth, and a gyroscope as well. But Job 38 is a good one as well. You should definitely read that and just see what it talks about. But Joshua 10 is another one where it says that the sun and moon stood still for about a day. So in order for something to stand still, it has to be moving. So I have a lot of people who try to twist scripture and tell me that, he meant the earth and that people couldn't understand cosmology and science back then.
$3 million miles away? I think not. I saw the setup occurring in the cloud patterns from where I was, knowing that tonight would be very likely spectacular to illustrate the placement of the sun in the clouds. And that's also what I'm highlighting here. The position of the sun vanishing from this perspective or setting is considerably more west. It was way over there, just even a month ago. Now it's right over here. Take a close look at that cloud that the sun is nestled in the midst of. What do you make of that? The reason why I do this and the reason this is important is simply because of the mass satanic mind control programming that's inundating the population of the world. And I'm one of the individuals that will help you to see this world in a different perspective. That's why I do this.
But if people long ago, thousands of years ago, were not caught up to modern day science, of what they call today, then why can't we explain things like the pyramids? The pyramids, we cannot replicate them today. We don't even fully understand how they work, yet they were there. So to say that man back then was ignorant, caveman, can't understand science, is a fallacy. Makes no sense to me. But there's actually over 200 verses in the Bible that speak to cosmology and creation that you just can't refute. I mean, if you want to twist it, you certainly can, but it's not conducive to what is actually being taught in it.
There's an experiment that people try when they throw the rock straight. It doesn't go that way, it goes straight up and goes back down. That's a very cool, interesting experiment to definitely try at home. Come on, guys. I've been through all the countries that you can ever dream of or think of. Somalia, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Dubai, France, obviously, Germany and Australia. Those are one of the most beautiful areas that you can actually think and look at and seeing that the earth is flat. When you travel so much, you experience so much, and you get that energy, and you see what's really in front of you, which is I'm very close to nature and the world, you'll see that the earth is definitely flat, period.
Well, I mean, I believe the truth always has a future. I mean, because I do think that it's the truth. But it's going to be very interesting because this is one of the oldest debates of all time throughout human history, right? And to find the future, you got to look into the past. Like Samuel Rowbotham proved that the Earth is flat in the 1800s, right? And you can get his book online called Zetetic Astronomy. It's an amazing book. Now we have technology, so it's really a battle for people's minds, right? So obviously there's a mainstream. There are people who control the internet, who control the mainstream, videos and all that stuff out there. Okay, what it's going to come down to in the future is a person's ability to think for themselves and have an open mind. That's what it comes down to. And there's so much propaganda out there. I see it as propaganda. These manufactured globe Earth videos trying to give someone a bunch of reasons in a bite-sized little video that they can just watch once, and now they forget about the topic because it confirms their conditioning that they had since they were in kindergarten and throughout school, right? Or you can break free from the propaganda and actually research on your own and look into it and think and do your own experiments. Buy a P90 camera, P900, whatever it is, or a telescope, or just go out and look at an island 30 miles away, 100 miles away. Do some deep thought on this. Look at the reflection of the sun on the ocean, right? You can see that reflection coming flat all the way from the horizon, which means horizontal, by the way, horizontal. You could only get that on a flat surface, right? Watch the reflection come all the way to your feet, right? That would actually be impossible on a sphere. You can't have a flat reflection on a sphere, right? So that's another logical thing that would prove to you the Earth is flat because of mutual exclusivity. So it comes down to having an open mind, and we'll see what happens because it's obviously an ongoing battle online. So I think what you got to do is go to the official Flat Earth and Globe discussion on Facebook and join that, become a member, and you can actually get in these discussions so that you don't just write it off. You know, I think a lot of it is spiritual. Somebody who's ready for it spiritually and mentally will be more receptive to researching it, because I know some very intelligent people, as soon as you tell them the word flat Earth, you can tell their brain is turned off to it right away. Oh, no, the Earth is a ball, because this, and they're going to try to justify without one piece of evidence, actually, unless you look at a picture of the horizon or a video from high altitude. They use a fisheye lens, right? So, but anytime we look at the horizon from an amateur weather balloon, the horizon's always flat.
Planes prove that the Earth is in fact flat. Before planes take off, they calibrate their gyroscopes. They set it to a certain level according to how it's sitting on the ground at that present moment before the plane even takes off. Once it's calibrated and the plane takes off, the gyroscope will let you know the plane is rising, and once it's to the height it needs to be for the flight, the plane will level out according to how it was sitting when it was calibrated on the ground. At that point, the plane will cruise for however long the flight is going to be, but no matter what, that plane is going to stay perfectly level. No matter where it goes, no matter how long the flight is, it's never going to deviate. It's going to stay perfectly level according to how it was calibrated before takeoff, while it was on the ground. It only moves when the plane is going to go down. It's never going to deviate from that perfectly level flat surface. What does that prove? It proves that the entire time that plane is in the air, it's flying over a completely flat surface. That right there tells you that the Earth is in fact flat. If this plane is flying over a completely flat surface the entire time.
I encourage you to go out and look at the horizon at the ocean and see the flat horizon, and to fly in an airplane and look to see if there's actually a curve, and to contemplate these things deeply.
See, that's not a shadow on the moon, it's just not there. It's because the shape of the moon is not a perfect sphere. Let me show you again. So where the sun and the moon appear on the horizon varies because they're running a course above the face of the Earth.
News Channel 3's Jeremy Chan was there and shows us how this is more than just disproving fake science.
Waves ripple through at the Salton Sea with a crowd of people gathered around. They aren't so much sightseeing, but demonstrating science by proving the Earth is round.
There's been an increase in belief in the flat Earth, and we decided to sort of address this in person.
It sounds like something straight out of a history textbook, but a group of flat Earth believers were out at the Salt Lake, like Mark Sargent, a prominent member of the community who was convinced after reading about it online.
9 months later, I'm banging my head on my computer, and I said, you know what? I'm going to go the other way with this. I'm not going to prove the globe anymore. I'm going to see if I could prove flat Earth.
Out to debunk the theory is James Underdown with the Independent Investigations Group, a nonprofit focused on using scientific means to investigate extraordinary claims. One demonstration involved a boat-based target with horizontal stripes.
We sent the boat out into the water, and the farther it goes, the more the stripes disappear.
That's meant to prove the curvature of the Earth. However, the flat earthers disagreed, sparking debate.
You guys think that's curved, and what I'm saying is I think it's perspective. So as the boat gets smaller like this, the waves that are close to us look bigger.
Anyone convinced from your group, anyone convinced that the Earth is round? Yeah.
Not a chance. It's flat.
So last week, NASA released the latest in the Blue Marble series, and most people have seen this image. It's of Earth, and they put out a new one. And I was curious how this works. I mean, when I first looked at it, I thought, oh, that's a beautiful photograph.
Right. We all do, right?
That would be wrong.
Snap with your Polaroid. That would be wrong.
It is not a photograph at all.
No kidding.
It is a composite of data sets from a bunch of different instruments on satellites that are, circling the globe. And they're taking data of like phytoplankton content in the sea, and that gives you what color the ocean is going to be. And then there's another instrument that's looking at the light coming off of the land, and that gives you another layer. So that's sort of how the older blue marbles were made. The first, well, maybe we should step back here, because there's a long history of this really iconic imagery.
And you tell it on a video. It's our video pick of the week up there on Science Friday, and you go through this whole story very well, and you tell the story with pictures, and it's such beautiful pictures.
I think you could argue that these are maybe the most mind-expanding images in human history, or anyway,
right.
You could argue against that too. But I think that that's a reasonable thing to say.
Absolutely.
And in 1968, the first one came out. It was Apollo 8, and it was Earthrise. Do you remember this photo?
I do. I was around then for Apollo 8.
Well, do you remember what it was like to see it?
Yes, it was. It was, how it's the iconic picture where we watch the moon rising over the Earth, right on the horizon.
Right.
Here the Apollo 8 astronauts were circling the moon, and there was Earth rising.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's tiny little Earth, a little blue dot, and you could see the oceans and the clouds and everything else.
I mean, it was kind of a revelation to me, and this really is revealing of my naivete and age, but that, we hadn't really thought about the Earth as that whole single hole in space until 1968, 1972, when Apollo 17 snapped the full disk image.
And then Carl Sagan came out with his pale blue dot.
Right.
And that cemented the whole idea.
Right. I think that was sort of the capstone on it. Until 2002, when Rob Simon, who's one of the NASA people I talked to this week, created this sort of digital 2.0 version of the blue marble. And that's what I was talking about before, where you have these different layers of data that are then translated into an image. Mm-hmm. And one of the funny things about this, I thought, was that in that version anyway, the instrument, the satellite Terra, when they're taking data, there are these gaps between the ribbons of sort of data it's getting as it's collecting.
Right.
So you have like a little hole of data, basically, between each ribbon. So they had to Photoshop in some clouds and stuff, which really seemed to bother him. But
of course.
I mean, why? Of course it would.
Right.
But what are you going to do? So this is the new image that came out this week, which is just a snapshot. It's not a full globe. Doesn't have any gaps. So I talked to Gene Feldman about how you might use science like this, and that you can hear about that in the video too. But the good news is that the next blue marble, should there be one, will not be photoshopped.
Not photoshopped. We won't need to do that.
No
need to fill in the gaps. If NASA's still got money and they're taking more pictures, we'll have another blue marble. So this is blue marble like 2.0. I mean,
this one is like 3.0,
yeah,
but yeah, it's like Earth eye candy.
It's beautiful.
It's really beautiful
It
stuff.
is gorgeous. You know, it's up there on our website at sciencefriday.com. And you're listening because the story you tell is terrific and how this all came about. But the pictures are just so marvelous.
They really
You're not listening anymore to the stories. You're watching them.
Bystanders cheer him on, but the 61-year-old rocket man, known as Mad Mike Hughes, feared he'd broken his back.
Easy, I know, Mike. Easy, guys, easy. Scooch your butt. I don't know if I broke my back, please. I don't know if I broke my back.
Photos show Mad Mike building his rocket over the last 10 years, all to prove what most people consider a ridiculous notion.
The world, I believe, is honestly flat.
We caught up with the limo driver today, ironically outside court where he was fighting a speeding ticket.
I took a pretty hard hit, and I'm feeling it right now. I believe I have a compressed fracture of one of my lower vertebrae.
He says the rocket ride was terrifying.
It's scary because once you pull the lever and you release the plunger, there's no way to stop it.
Even so, this rocket man says he's glad he did it.
We were all taught to love the idea of outer space and space travel. Well, what if that wasn't true? What if there was no such thing as outer space and that we actually live in an enclosed system? What if the sun is actually only a couple thousand miles up? Actually give it a possibility. Look up at the sun and say, wow, could the sun actually be really close and small and moving and the earth actually not moving? And to look back in history, like, you know, whether or not, whatever your religion is, look at the Bible as a study of history, right? You could go to, there's a website, testingtheglobe.com, where it talks about like 67 passages from the Bible talking about the earth being flat. And Samuel Robotham, who looks at it from a scientific view.
But at the end of the day, I always would recommend people to not take my word for it. I think people should research on their own. I knew it took me hours and hours. It took me over a year to really come to the realization that we don't live on a spinning ball. You know, water always seeks and finds its level. Every picture that we have from NASA is CGI. The Bible tells you that it's flat. Stationary, that the sun, moon, and stars are the ones moving, not us. Your body feels no spin. Gravity is only a theory, which can easily be explained with density and buoyancy. But, you know, look at it for yourself and, you know, pray about it and research and see if you come to the same conclusion that I did.
It would be a very good way of knowing the earth is flat instead of round, because it's like, that's a beautiful thing, because obviously we're walking straight. It makes sense, right? It's not like we're walking in circles. It's a beautiful thing because we're gonna know, like, wow, we kept trying to guess, going back and forth, and now many million years we're gonna find out that the earth is definitely flat because it makes sense. We're driving straight, we're walking straight, you know, so I think that's just pretty awesome how the whole world is created flat.
If you do the right research and you have an open mind and you talk to the right people and you have an open heart, you will be surprised at what you find.